On our newscast tonight, people in the U.S. state of Missouri react violently to a grand jury's decision not to indict a white police officer in the shooting death of an unarmed black teenager. U.S. President Barack Obama calls for calm. And U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel steps down, the first reshuffle in Obama's cabinet after the Democratic Party's crushing defeat in recent midterm elections. It's been 1 year since members of Korea's minor opposition Unified Progressive Party were arrested on charges of plotting to overthrow the government. Today, final arguments are heard in a court hearing. These and more coming up on Early Edition at 6.
Hello and welcome to our newscast. It's Tuesday, November 25th here in Korea, live from Seoul. I'm Na-hyun Kyung.
And I'm Daniel Chen. Thank you for joining us. Today we begin with the latest in the U.S. state of Missouri, where violent protesters took to the streets on Monday local time. That's after a grand jury's decision in the shooting death of Michael Brown was announced.
Right. The jury decided not to indict the officer responsible, and shortly following the announcement, there was looting, cars were vandalized, and properties were set on fire. It was just a chaos in Ferguson.
That's right. Our Kim Hyun-bin starts us off.
Angry protesters roamed the streets of Ferguson, Missouri. Stores are looted and burned down. Police retaliate by firing tear gas and flashbangs. This was the scene shortly after it was announced that a grand jury had decided not to indict police officer Darren Wilson, who is white, in the shooting death of Michael Brown, an unarmed black teenager, an incident that set off weeks of demonstrations over the summer.
They determined that no probable cause exists to file any charge against Officer Wilson and returned a no true bill on each of the 5 indictments.
Shortly after the announcement, there were reports of gunshots fired, looting, and clashes with police. U.S. President Barack Obama, in response to the grand jury's decision, called on people to remain calm.
First and foremost, we are a nation built on the rule of law. And so we need to accept that this decision was the grand jury's to make. But I join Michael's parents in asking anyone who protests this decision to do so peacefully.
Brown's family said they were profoundly disappointed by the jury's decision, but they asked people to channel their frustration in ways that will make a positive difference. The decision comes amid long-standing racial tensions in a predominantly black city, where white people are dominant in the power structure. The grand jury that decided against indicting Darren Wilson was made up of 9 white and 3 black members. They began meeting in late August, shortly after the incident, and heard evidence provided by the prosecution, as well as eyewitness accounts of the altercation that left 18-year-old Michael Brown dead. Brown's family lawyer says the teen was not resisting when he was shot and killed by police officer Wilson. Wilson's supporters say he opened fire in self-defense. Ahead of the grand jury's decision, Missouri Governor Jay Nixon declared a 30-day state of emergency and called up 400 National Guard troops to the area. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
And staying with the U.S., it's the first change in cabinet since Democrats were defeated in midterm elections earlier this month. Defense Chief Chuck Hagel stepped down from his post on Monday, Washington time. Choi Yoo-sun tells us more.
It's been the greatest privilege of my life, to lead, and most important, to serve with the men and women of the Defense Department and support their families.
The U.S. Defense Secretary's resignation on Monday is the Obama administration's first cabinet shakeup after the Democratic Party suffered crushing losses in midterm elections a few weeks ago. Praising Hagel's ability to balance defense reforms at home and addressing external security challenges, President Obama, however, did not mention the specifics that led to his departure.
Now, last month, Chuck came to me to discuss the final quarter of my presidency and determined that having guided the department through this transition, it was an appropriate time for him to complete his service.
When the former Republican senator and Vietnam War veteran was appointed to head the Pentagon nearly 2 years ago, he was tasked with bringing home troops from Afghanistan and Iraq and slashing the defense budget. Since then, Washington's military policies have shifted in response to growing security threats from Islamic State militants in Iraq and Syria. Reports had emerged of a rift between Hagel and the administration on the U.S. strategy against the extremist group. Analysts suggest Hagel may have been the fall guy as the Republicans, now in control of both congressional houses, are expected to scrutinize the administration's foreign policies. Hagel will stay in his role until his successor is named and confirmed by the Senate. Some possible candidates include Michelle Flournoy, a former Undersecretary of Defense, and former Deputy Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
Officials from Iran and 6 world powers, including the U.S. and Germany, have agreed to not agree. Both said significant progress was made over Iranian nuclear program, but apparently not enough to reach a deal this time around. Shin Se-min has this report.
A new deal has been set for a deal over Tehran's nuclear capabilities after negotiations to reach a comprehensive agreement in Vienna failed. 5 world powers plus Germany and Iran decided instead to give themselves an additional 7 months to hammer out an agreement. The two sides have been discussing the terms of Tehran scaling back its nuclear program in exchange for easing Western sanctions that have hurt the Iranian economy. They will reconvene in December to pick up where they left off. Iranian leader Hassan Rouhani said most gaps had been removed through the talks, while U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said the discussions had been difficult.
These talks aren't going to suddenly get easier just because we extend them. We believe a comprehensive deal that addresses the world's concerns is possible. It is desirable.
A temporary nuclear agreement that mandates Iran avoid sensitive nuclear activities gives Tehran access to some $700 million of its assets per month and lets it continue with its nuclear-related research and development. The major sticking points in a permanent agreement appear to center on what sanctions would be lifted and how much uranium Iran would be allowed to enrich. The West has long believed that Tehran has designs on building nuclear weapons. Iran insists its nuclear program is intended solely to diversify its energy sources. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
For the first time in Korean history, a political party may be forced to disband by the Constitutional Court. Judges listened to closing arguments in the case against the Unified Progressive Party, which had members that were accused last year of plotting to overthrow the South Korean government and being North Korean sympathizers. Our Kim Young-gil has more on this report.
The Constitutional Court on Tuesday began hearing closing arguments in a trial that will ultimately determine whether the minor opposition Unified Progressive Party will be forced to disband over accusations it had plans to overthrow the government. Justice Minister Hwang Kyo-an, speaking on behalf of the state, told the court that the UPP was based on a political doctrine that violated South Korea's constitutional order. He claimed that the UPP's political objective was to instigate a rebellion against the government and achieve a federal form of unification with Pyongyang. Chief of the UPP Lee Jung-hee countered and defended her party before the court, saying it had no affiliation whatsoever with North Korea and that the government was guilty of political suppression. The accusations date back to last year when 3 UPP members and lawmaker Lee Seok-gi were arrested on charges of plotting to topple the South Korean government and blow up major government facilities in the event of a war with the North. They await trial on those charges. The Constitutional Court's decision will come before then. It is expected by the end of this year and will determine whether the UPP is allowed to continue on as a party. If they are forced to disband, it will mark a first in Korean history. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Let us move on to other stories. South and North, the two Koreas have drifted apart in many ways since the Korean War. Physique and state of health are some of the more evident differences after some 60 years of separation. Pyongyang's infant mortality rate is also much higher. Our Park Ji-won has this report.
malnutrition, a lack of clean water, and poor public health infrastructure. These are just some of the chronic health challenges ordinary North Koreans face. The combination of these factors can be seen clearly in the widening height gap between South and North Koreans. For adult men, the gap is about 15 centimeters on average. For 11-year-old boys, it's even worse, the gap reaching nearly 20 centimeters. Due to the stunted growth of many of its citizens, the North Korean military was forced to lower its minimum height requirement to 138 centimeters 2 years ago. The dire conditions have caused the gap into Korea's life expectancy and infant mortality rate to widen as well. The life expectancy gap is 12 years, with North Koreans living an average of less than 70 years, while South Koreans live 81 years on average. The infant and child mortality rate in North Korea is also 9 times higher than that of South Korea.
North Korean children are consistently exposed to poor hygiene, such as unsterilized water, due to the country's lack of electricity and awful public health system.
The main causes of death are also very different. The percentage of people who die from infectious diseases in North Korea is 5 times higher than that of South Korea. Taking Germany's case before reunification, the gap in life expectancy between people in West and East Germany was only 3 years at the time of their reunification in 1990, and it took nearly 20 years to close that relatively small gap. Experts say narrowing the huge health gap between the two Koreas is an urgent matter.
Helping North Korea build a reasonable health service is a top priority. A large portion of the cost of unification will be spent on establishing a public health system in North Korea.
Experts add that securing a safe water supply and developing agricultural technologies are also required to boost the health of ordinary North Koreans. 박지원, Arirang News.
A one-day entry ban.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best. With Na Hyung-kyung and Daniel Che.
Arirang News.
Arirang News.
Arirang News.
On Early Edition at 6.
President Park Geun-hye has called on the government to look into recent corruption scandals involving the defense industry. Speaking at a cabinet meeting on Tuesday morning, President Park said stamping out corruption was a priority and non-negotiable. Her comments came one day after the government launched a pan-government investigation team composed of police, prosecutors, state auditors, and taxation officials. Now, they are tasked with looking into ties between the defense industry and the private sector that have produced a number of scandals. In one case revealed last week by police, a local firm earned more than $1 million by selling second-hand parts to the Navy between 2009 and 2013 as if they were brand new. More than a dozen people have already been booked on corruption charges in that case. On the economic front, Korea's snowballing household debt has hit another high. The Bank of Korea says the amount of household debt, which refers to credit purchases and loans extended by financial institutions, stood at roughly $950 billion as of the end of September. That's up around $20 billion from the end of June. The record debt stems from the government's deregulation drive in the housing sector and a lowered key interest rate, which worked in tandem to boost housing loans. Now, government measures to boost the nation's flagging birth rate may be bearing fruit. Statistics Korea says nearly 38,000 babies were born in September. That's a 2.2% jump on year and represents the 6th straight month of increase. The figures are welcome news for the government, which has been promoting policies to boost the low fertility rate. But analysts are cautiously optimistic, pointing out that although Tuesday's figures are encouraging, it's too early to call them a significant rise, given that the birth rate in 2013 was 10% lower than 2012. And it's not just the birth rate that's relatively low compared to other countries. Yesterday, we had a report about how the average Korean woman is almost forced to choose between her career and raising a child. Now, this report will reaffirm that reality. Here's our Lee Ji-yoon with more.
Getting married, giving birth, and raising children all seem to be keeping Korean women from working. In its latest report, the Korea Economic Research Institute compared the country's economic activity rate to that of 7 OECD member countries. The economic activity rate measures the proportion of the working-age population who are working or are available for work or training. The 7 leading OECD countries, which include the United States and Japan, all have populations of more than 10 million and an average employment rate of 70%. For Korean women between the ages of 25 and 54, the institute says the economic activity rate stood at about 63%. Compare that to the average of 76.2% for the 7 OECD countries, and you have an over 13 percentage point difference. The employment rate for women in Korea wasn't any better. A little over 60% of them are currently employed, while the average employment rate for Korea's 7 OECD counterparts was nearly 72%. While women in Korea are struggling to stay in the job market, the employment rate for Korean men was actually a bit higher than that of the 7 OECD countries' average. Older people in Korea also seem to be working more than ever as the country's aging population is growing. Korea's economic activity rate, as well as the employment rate for people aged 65 or older, was more than double the average for the 7 OECD countries. Experts say the government needs to introduce a more flexible work system for women, so they're willing and able to work even after having a child. They add reducing the wage gap with men might also help, while also lowering the cost for marriage and childbirth. Lee Ji-yoon, Arirang News.
The market conditions for Hyundai Motor and Kia Motors aren't exactly ideal right now, with a weakening Japanese currency and the sluggish global economic recovery. Yet, confidence exudes from Korea's top automaker. They managed to sell over 6 million units worldwide as of October, and they say it's going to up its yearly goal. Our Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
Hyundai Motor and its sister company Kia Motors have laid out a goal of selling 8 million units this year. Hyundai Motor Group Chairman Chung Mong-gu encouraged employees on Monday, saying that while the market conditions are tough due to the weak Japanese yen and strong Korean won, companies shine brightest in times of difficulty. Korean exporters and especially automakers have been struggling due to the falling Japanese currency as it erodes the price competitiveness of their products against their Japanese rivals. But with Hyundai Kia's global sales already standing at over 6.5 million units in the first 10 months of this year, the auto group expects sales for all of 2014 to beat an earlier target of 7.86 million. The new goal comes as the company enjoyed a better-than-expected performance in emerging markets. Sales in India and Brazil rose 8% and 7.2% respectively in the January to October period on year, while sales in China jumped over 10%. Reaching the 8 million target also means that Hyundai and Kia, which together rank 5th in global auto sales, are one step closer to becoming a top-notch global automaker. After selling 8 million units in 2006, Toyota saw a rapid increase in sales and outpaced General Motors, then the world's #1 automaker, in 2008. Hyundai and Kia will now prepare for what lies ahead by improving quality, raising production, and aggressively targeting emerging markets. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Well, some loyal Korean fans of a world-famous furniture retailer have December 18th marked on their calendar. They are anxiously counting down to the day when IKEA opens its first store in Korea. But before the launch, Korea's Fair Trade Commission says it's going to launch an inquiry into product pricing. This is in response to allegations that the company has set higher prices in Korea, nearly double the price seen in other parts of the world. An official from the watchdog says a consumer group will be tasked with comparing the prices. The results will be published around February. And the Commission says the findings will help consumers make smarter choices and could even pressure IKEA to voluntarily cut its prices. There's a new kid on the block eyeing Korea's hold on the information and communications technology sector. It's Denmark, and a new report from the International Telecommunications Union suggests they are the new #1. Korea had been ranked atop the ICT Development Index of 166 countries for 3 years running, but in its latest report, Korea scored at 8.85, being barely edged out by Denmark. The index measures a country's level of ICT access, use, and ability. Sweden has ranked 3rd, followed by Iceland and Britain. The report said more than 3 billion people are currently connected online. It estimates that total mobile subscriptions will reach 7 billion by the end of this year. Well, we've reported many times on the convergence of IT technology and wearables, and we have yet another example. Researchers have developed a sensor that can be paired with wearable devices with hopes of helping people prevent cardiovascular diseases. Here's our Kwon So-ah with more.
The high potential for wearable technology has already been predicted by market watchers. And apart from making life more comfortable and fun, it could eventually be a lifesaver. A joint research team from Korea and the United States recently developed a sensor that can be stuck to your skin like a Band-Aid and could provide early detection of cardiovascular diseases such as heart attacks or strokes. Tens of thousands of microcilia, or hair-like extensions of cell surfaces, have been bedded into a sensor the size of a fingernail. These can then measure fine waves in blood vessels. When integrated with smartwatches or other wearable devices, it'll become easy and efficient to monitor one's health, especially since strokes and heart failure can strike suddenly.
While it was difficult to respond to emergency cardiovascular diseases with existing equipment, due to their complexity and high price, the new wearable sensor will be able to help in emergency situations.
Cardiovascular diseases are the leading cause of death in the world. The World Health Organization forecasts more than 23 million people will die of heart attacks or strokes by the year 2030. Cost-effective wearable sensors could be the answer for low- and middle-income countries, as 80% of CVD-related deaths occur in that group. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
And moving on to the last story of today, public transportation in Seoul is getting a bit more animated. And when I say animated, literally animated.
Right. We've had buses and trains with popular animated characters, but this one in particular, I believe, could run for presidency here in Korea. Many people would vote for Pororo, and now he's decorating a set of cabs running here in Seoul.
That's right. If you haven't seen one yet, here's our Connie Lee with this next report.
Pororo, the little penguin with its yellow helmet and orange goggles, is now coming to you in taxis. Starting Tuesday, 20 of these so-called Pororo taxis are running on the streets of Seoul. From the outer decorations to inner car accessories, Pororo and his friends have taken over these cars, much to the delight of Korean children. No wonder Pororo is also deemed the children's president. Passengers can ride with this popular animation character for a test period until May of next year.
We came up with this idea when we were thinking about how to increase people's use of taxis, even if it's only by a little bit.
The fares for these Pororo taxis are the same as other regular taxis in Seoul, and because there are only a handful available, reservations can be made online. Pororo is just the latest animated TV character to be featured on public transportation in the capital. Tayo, the little bus, has been literally running the streets of Seoul since March, and with its huge popularity, the one-month test term has been extended until the end of this year. And the larva character is plastered all over a train on Seoul's subway line 2, entertaining the eyes of passengers since the beginning of this month. Seoul Mayor Park Won-soon says the coming of life of these characters is a way to decorate the city. And of course, please the little ones. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
And now the weather. It was a mild day here in Seoul, but raining and even snowing in some regions, I heard.
It is that time of the year now. Let's turn to Michelle Park at the Weather Center for the latest. Michelle.
Good evening, guys. The weather was nice with mostly clear and sunny skies. However, as you can see, it's getting cloudier as we move into our evening. And tomorrow we can expect similar weather conditions with similar temperatures, and we'll start off the morning with cloudy skies, but things will eventually clear up. Now, except for those over you in Jeollanam-do province and Jeju Island where rain is expected in the morning, have your umbrellas throughout the whole week because nationwide rain is in the forecast on Friday and Sunday as well. And to our readings for tomorrow, so we'll start off the Wednesday morning at 5 degrees before reaching up to 14 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan will reach up to 15 and 16 degrees. And moving over to other regions, Jeju Island peaks to 15 also, while Dokdo and Mankungang reaches both at 11 degrees. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you for that, Michelle. That's all from us. Thanks for watching. Good day to you if you're tuning in from different time zones. This has been Daniel Che.
And I'm Na Hyun-kyung, who's still thinking about Bororo. I can't get it off my mind. Anyway, have a great rest of the evening for those in Korea. Daniel and I will be back tomorrow, same time. Bye-bye for now.